actions committed by Combs during Mescudi's brief relationship with Cassie Ventura in 2011, during an apparent breakup between Cassie and Combs.
Tonight, explosive new testimony rocks the federal trial of Sean Diddy Combs. Rapper Kid Cudi has taken the stand, describing a series of unsettling incidents that prosecutors now say point to a larger criminal enterprise. From a suspicious break-in to a firebombed Porsche to emotional warnings from Cassie Ventura herself, what's unfolding inside this courtroom is more than celebrity drama. It's a federal case with serious implications. This is what's Poppin', bringing you the facts, the evidence, and the voices shaping this historic case.
Relationship with Cassie Ventura during this time, and Combs allegedly made threats against him because of it. Mescudi testifying that he believes Combs actually broke into his house and testified that a few months later, a Molotov cocktail was placed on his Porsche, damaging his car. He told the jury he reached out to Combs after his car caught fire and described him with his hands behind his back like a Marvel supervillain.
Week 2 of the Sean Diddy Combs federal trial took a dramatic turn as Scott Mescudi, known professionally as Kid Cudi, took the witness stand to deliver deeply personal and legally significant testimony. With calm but deliberate words, Cudi described events dating back to 2011 when he had a brief relationship with Cassie Ventura. According to his account, not long after the relationship began, his Los Angeles home was broken into under suspicious circumstances. He wasn't there at the time, but upon returning, he found Christmas gifts he had wrapped for family members torn open and his dog locked inside a bathroom.
Cudi's testimony goes to trying to prove some of those predicate offenses. He says that Diddy and his team burglarized his home after Diddy found out that he was dating Cassie Ventura, and then shortly thereafter blew up his vehicle, which goes to arson. And so that was really the thrust of the testimony. That was the purpose for putting him on. There were some points scored by defense as well. It was some colorful testimony.
Even more concerning, his home's surveillance cameras had been turned away from their usual angles, suggesting intentional tampering. Though no items were stolen, Cudi emphasized that the intrusion felt personal. Federal prosecutors are now using this testimony to bolster claims that Diddy engaged in acts of intimidation and retaliation against individuals who were romantically involved with Ventura. Cudi's testimony didn't directly accuse Combs of committing the break-in, but painted a picture of fear, tension, and unease. He went on to describe how this was just the beginning of a series of events that escalated in both scope and intensity, laying the foundation for what prosecutors describe as a broader pattern of coercion that fits the legal standards of a racketeering case. This revelation brought a noticeable shift in courtroom energy as jurors listened intently to the first of what would become several accounts, suggesting Diddy's actions extended beyond the boundaries of personal relationships and into coordinated efforts to control or silence perceived threats. In a continuation of his testimony, Kid Cudi provided further context that prosecutors allege points to a pattern of retaliatory behavior linked directly to Sean Combs. Following the unexplained break-in at his home, Cudi recalled a disturbing incident involving his vehicle, a Porsche 911 convertible. In 2012, the car was set on fire in his driveway, and investigators discovered what appeared to be the remnants of a Molotov cocktail, specifically a bottle with flammable liquid and a cloth wick, which had reportedly been dropped through the sunroof. Cudi testified that the car had a visible hole in the roof where the object was inserted, leading to significant internal fire damage. He explained that on the day of the incident, he was staying at a former partner's residence when he received an early morning call from a pet sitter alerting him that his car was engulfed in flames. After contacting authorities, he rushed to the scene and later submitted a police report. Cudi also recounted a cryptic phone call with Combs following the fire, where he asked point-blank if Combs had been in his house, and the response he received was non-committal but unsettling. The timing of the events, combined with prior warnings from Cassie Ventura about Diddy's possible reaction to their relationship, led Cudi to believe the two events were connected. While no charges were filed against Combs for the break-in or the fire, and no physical evidence such as fingerprints or surveillance video has emerged, tying him directly to either event, prosecutors are leveraging the emotional weight and circumstantial alignment of Cudi's story to support broader claims of a criminal enterprise. They argue that these incidents were not random, but rather coordinated efforts to threaten or intimidate.
Kid Cudi had dated Cassie Ventura, and she testified that it made Sean Combs jealous and angry.
Mescudi testifying about an alleged break-in at his house in 2011, which he says was Combs showing up when he wasn't home. Mescudi testifying that he had a tense phone call with Combs, where Combs insinuates he was at Mescudi's home. I said, expletive, you in my house? And he was like, what's up? I was like, expletive, are you in my house? And he said, I just want to talk to you. I was like, I'm on my way over right now. He was like, I'm here. When he arrived, Combs was not there.
But he said Christmas presents he had bought for members of his family were unwrapped, torn open, and his dog was locked in the bathroom.
Mescudi says he later called police, who took a report. But the headline moment of this testimony, Mescudi describing an alleged 2012 incident where his Porsche 911 convertible had been set on fire. It looks like the top of my Porsche was cut open, and that's where they inserted the Molotov cocktail, Mescudi testified. Arson is part of the racketeering conspiracy count Combs faces. Cassie Ventura previously testified that Combs threatened to have Kid Cudi's car blown up.
Prosecutors in the Sean Combs trial are now using Kid Cudi's experiences as key elements to support their claim that Combs was the head of an illegal enterprise, one that used violence and intimidation as tools of control. Under the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, better known as RICO, the federal government does not need to prove that Combs committed each act personally, but rather that he led or operated an ongoing criminal enterprise that committed at least 2 related predicate crimes. Arson is one such predicate offense, and prosecutors are arguing that the fire that destroyed Cudi's Porsche fits squarely into this legal framework. Forensic specialists testified that the nature of the fire and the device used indicated planning and intent, not a spontaneous or accidental fire. Though Combs has denied any involvement and no forensic evidence directly links him to the act, prosecutors emphasized the proximity of the incident to Cudi's romantic involvement with Cassie Ventura, as well as Cudi's recorded conversations and sworn testimony, as indirect yet compelling proof of intent. The strategy employed by the prosecution is to present a pattern of behavior across multiple years that includes not just Cudi's account, but similar incidents described by other witnesses. By doing this, they aim to demonstrate that Combs was not merely reacting emotionally, but systematically retaliating against those who challenged or disrespected his control. The emphasis is on the consistency and timeline of events, which, according to prosecutors, shows a calculated effort to enforce dominance, a hallmark of what RICO laws were designed to target in cases of organized illegal activity. Cassie Ventura's earlier courtroom testimony played a critical role in validating and reinforcing the claims made by Kid Cudi. She detailed a deep sense of fear and helplessness, particularly around the time she began dating Cudi, explaining that she believed Combs might take drastic measures to retaliate. In one particularly disturbing piece of evidence, Ventura admitted in court that she had given Combs Cudi's home address, stating that she felt pressured and feared what would happen if she refused. Not long after sharing that information, Cassie called Cudi in a panic and urged him to pick her up and leave her apartment. They checked into the Sunset Marquis Hotel in Los Angeles, hoping to avoid any potential confrontation. However, according to Cassie, they soon received a call from a mutual friend who claimed to be parked outside Cudi's home and saw Combs and another man inside. This sequence of events formed a chilling narrative when presented alongside Cudi's own testimony. It suggested that Combs had indeed taken aggressive steps after learning about their relationship. Cassie's emotional account, coupled with recorded calls and emails, helped establish the context in which these incidents occurred. Her words, filled with anxiety and urgency, resonated with the jury and seemed to underscore the seriousness of the allegations. Prosecutors pointed to this testimony as critical in explaining not just what happened, but why it happened. They allege that Combs viewed Cassie's personal choices as a challenge to his control and responded in a way that escalated beyond private disagreements and into criminal territory.
Recording played in the courtroom today. I don't know in the courtroom if there was a reaction, but kind of give the context to that and what the reaction was.
One of the things that the government keeps bringing up is that Cassie felt like she was being blackmailed by Combs, that he had videos of these drug-fueled sex parties known as freak-offs, and that he threatened to release those videos publicly, and that at one point he even showed them to people, and that this was to embarrass her, to silence her, and to force her to keep having freak-offs, that he hung it over her head. And in one shocking moment today, I was in the courtroom. They actually played audio of Cassie screaming at a man named Sujit. This was after she had learned that he might have actually seen one of those freak-off videos. But in that audio recording, that Cassie actually was the one who recorded herself talking to Sujit. In this recording, she is screaming at him, saying that she'll kill him, or that she'll have someone else take care of him and kill him. And it's a different side of Cassie that really none of us have ever heard before. I definitely don't think it's the last time that we're going to hear that audio recording. I think at some point we'll see the defense or even the prosecution circle back to that. The overall vibe today in the courtroom is that Combs' defense team is struggling. There's a lot of stopping and starting because the prosecutors are constantly objecting to the evidence that they're trying to admit. The judge is even getting frustrated at one point, saying that we need to set ground rules.
During the proceedings, federal prosecutors introduced a range of photographic and audio evidence to support the testimonies of Kid Cudi and Cassie Ventura. Among the most compelling pieces were detailed photos of the damage done to Cudi's Porsche 911 convertible, showing a 2-foot-wide hole in the roof and extensive burn damage throughout the vehicle's interior. These images were accompanied by forensic analysis, confirming that a fire-starting device had been used, described by investigators as a Molotov-style object consistent with intentional arson. Audio recordings were also presented to the jury, including phone calls and voicemails between Cassie and Cudi during the time of the incidents. In these recordings, both expressed visible fear and confusion about the ongoing events. The audio files, according to prosecutors, show that the individuals involved were under intense emotional distress and actively trying to avoid danger. Taken together, the visual and auditory evidence was meant to establish a pattern of intimidation, reinforcing the idea that the events were not coincidental, but intentional acts designed to frighten or punish. Prosecutors emphasized that although Combs' direct involvement was not captured in these materials, the combination of physical evidence, timeline alignment, and corroborating witness statements made a strong case for his connection to a broader enterprise. The jury was reminded that in a RICO case, direct evidence is not always required to show leadership or responsibility, especially if a pattern of behavior can be proven. A tense moment unfolded in court when Diddy's defense attorney, Brian Steele, raised objections regarding the direction of Kid Cudi's testimony. Steele expressed concern that Cudi might be about to imply, either directly or indirectly, that Sean Combs had been involved in more serious, uncharged acts of violence. Specifically, Steele referenced a concern that Cudi could say he feared for his life because he believed Combs had harmed others. The defense argued that even the suggestion of such an idea could unfairly bias the jury and requested a sidebar to address the issue. The judge, however, denied a mistrial request, stating clearly that no such statement had been made and that future objections would be handled as needed. The incident underscored the sensitivity of the case and the fine line the court is walking between allowing emotional, truthful testimony and protecting the defendant's right to a fair trial. While Cudi never made the alleged statement on record, the legal exchange highlighted the defense's fear of jury prejudice and the prosecution's confidence that the narrative, even without direct accusations of fatal violence, was damning enough. The court's refusal to declare a mistrial sent a strong message. The proceedings would continue, and testimony based on lived experiences and emotional impact would not be curtailed unless it violated clear evidentiary rules. For viewers and legal observers alike, it demonstrated just how high the emotional and legal stakes are in this trial.
His nickname, right? Puffy, because he huffs and he puffs, but it's no laughing matter. We know that he's capable of incredibly terrifying violence. Just take a look at that 2016 security footage of Cassie being brutally beaten by him. And so, now we're learning that perhaps he might have been on medication. He sought treatment, and he may have bipolar disorder.
Another powerful moment came when George Kaplan, a former executive assistant to Sean Combs, testified about his experiences working closely with the music mogul between 2013 and 2015. Kaplan described a workplace where unsettling behavior was normalized and silence was expected. He recounted one specific incident on a private jet where he saw Cassie Ventura lying on the floor after an alleged confrontation with Combs. According to Kaplan, she shouted, "Isn't anybody seeing this?" But no one, including security, intervened. He also described being instructed to prepare hotel rooms with specific items before private meetings. These included bottles of baby oil, alcohol, and various materials that prosecutors are framing as tools associated with adult-themed gatherings. Kaplan's job also included cleaning up those rooms afterward, ensuring that no evidence of what occurred inside could be traced or photographed. Over time, he said, the emotional toll of witnessing what he believed to be inappropriate and possibly abusive behavior became too much, prompting him to leave the job. His testimony helped prosecutors build the argument that Combs maintained a controlled environment where assistants and employees were expected to facilitate and conceal certain activities. Although Kaplan did not claim to witness criminal activity directly, his account of repeated discomfort, emotional distress, and pressure to remain silent offered valuable insight into the culture surrounding Combs at the time, one that prosecutors say enabled ongoing misconduct. In a particularly eye-opening testimony, singer Dawn Richard, a former member of the girl group Danity Kane, provided details about a 2010 incident involving Sean Combs and Cassie Ventura that took place in public. Richard alleged that she saw Combs strike Ventura during a private conversation at a restaurant in West Hollywood. She further testified that several other well-known figures were present at the time, including Usher, Nayo, record executive Jimmy Iovine, and rapper Big Daddy Kane. While none of these individuals have been accused of wrongdoing or have responded to the claims publicly, their names being associated with the incident raised serious questions about the extent to which others may have witnessed or been aware of the alleged abuse. According to Richard, the group then left the restaurant and got into a vehicle where another altercation occurred. She claimed that Combs hit Ventura again and told her to remain silent. Richard said the rest of the car ride was marked by uncomfortable silence. This testimony, though lacking direct confirmation from the other celebrities named, was used by prosecutors to illustrate how the alleged abuse may have occurred in plain sight, and not just behind closed doors. The prosecution emphasized that while these individuals were not complicit, the presence of such high-profile witnesses could demonstrate a broader atmosphere of tolerance, or at least silence, around Combs' behavior. The hope, according to legal experts, is that such testimony reinforces the theme of unchecked power and social insulation, often associated with influential public figures.
Possible.
Why is it impossible?
Because I'm a black man.
You can be
I
scared.
have so many other things to be fearful of. A clown is not going to scare me.
Really?
Yes. I'm not afraid of clowns.
But I heard that you were.
An individual who appeared in court under the stage name The Punisher also testified this week, providing unusual but relevant insight into private events allegedly organized by Sean Combs. Identified as Sheree Hayes, the witness described being hired between 8 and 12 times for adult-themed performances that took place in luxury hotel rooms and private residences. Hayes stated that while Combs directed the setup and logistics, including what performers were expected to do, he never witnessed violence or force firsthand. However, he did note that Cassie Ventura often looked visibly uncomfortable during these sessions, sighing or hesitating when directed to participate in specific actions. Although Hayes admitted he could not determine whether Cassie's participation was entirely voluntary or coerced, his observations added to a growing narrative that these events were structured and possibly exploitative. Prosecutors presented this testimony as further evidence that Combs maintained orchestrated environments for intimate gatherings that blurred the lines of consent and control. Hayes emphasized that he never saw Combs use substances during these events and that everything appeared highly coordinated, which supports the prosecution's argument that the actions were not spontaneous or chaotic, but methodical and deliberate. Though the defense may argue that Hayes' uncertainty about Cassie's willingness undermines the reliability of the claim, his consistency with prior testimonies helps create a timeline that shows repetition, hierarchy, and calculated organization, all characteristics critical to proving racketeering under federal law. Rounding out the week's testimonies was forensic psychologist Dr. Dawn Hughes, who was brought in by the prosecution as an expert on domestic abuse, trauma bonding, and psychological coercion. Though she did not interview Cassie Ventura or any of the other alleged victims in this case, Dr. Hughes provided valuable context to help the jury understand how and why individuals may remain in abusive or controlling relationships. She explained that manipulation often manifests not just through physical aggression, but through emotional isolation, financial dependence, and fear of retaliation. Dr. Hughes outlined common behaviors seen in long-term abusive relationships, such as a victim justifying their abuser's behavior, minimizing their own experiences, or remaining silent out of fear for loved ones' safety. Her analysis was particularly important in framing Ventura's previous testimony and public silence. During cross-examination, the defense attempted to undermine Dr. Hughes's credibility by pointing out her compensation for the case and her history of testifying more frequently for the prosecution than the defense. However, Dr. Hughes stood firm, reiterating that her role was to provide education, not make a judgment on guilt. Her testimony served as a psychological lens through which the jury could interpret the emotional, behavioral, and logistical elements of the case. Legal analysts noted that her perspective could help jurors connect the dots between indirect evidence and the lived experiences of those involved, further supporting the narrative that what unfolded over the years was not just dysfunctional, but potentially criminal under federal RICO statutes. As the testimonies build and new witnesses come forward, a clearer picture begins to emerge, one of power, fear, and control. Whether the jury finds these stories credible enough to convict remains to be seen, but the national conversation is already shifting. We'll continue to follow the courtroom developments, the legal strategies, and the voices behind this case. For ongoing updates, expert breakdowns, and verified reporting, be sure to subscribe to What's Poppin', turn on notifications, and join us as we continue to uncover the truth.